Welcome, Middlers, to the Medium in the Middle podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I take you on a journey of self-discovery and spiritual exploration. I am a Reiki master teacher, a spiritual and business mentor, and of course, a psychic medium. And I am here to share my story and help you tap into your extraordinary abilities. Join me every Wednesday as we dive into the realms of intuition, energy healing, and all things mystical. Whether you're a seasoned spiritual seeker or just dipping your toes into the magical waters, this podcast is your go-to source for inspiration, guidance, and a whole lot of lessons and laughter along the way. Let's get started. Hello, Middlers. Welcome to episode 270. My name is Stephanie. I am the medium in the middle. Welcome back if you are a middler. Welcome if you are new. I have a spirit story for you. This one is really sweet and beautiful. Today I will be sharing a story about a dad who snuck in to make sure he was heard in one of my Reiki sessions, and it was just a really beautiful way for spirit to show up. So if you've been here since episode 1, you already know my journey and my story with mediumship. If you are newer to the podcast and you haven't listened to every single episode, I'm just going to quickly give you a Cole's Notes version. So I took my Reiki training way back in 2018, and that is when my mediumship started. So I was doing Reiki and I would start to get names or I would start to know things, and everyone was like, "How do you know that?" And I used to say, I don't know. And after months and months and months, I finally realized what was happening and I started to develop my mediumship skills. Fast forward some time later, I end up opening my own business and running Reiki sessions, the business I just celebrated that hit 5 years. And because I had this podcast, everybody knew I was a medium. So they were coming to me and they knew that spirit would come through in their Reiki sessions. So I was doing mediumship in almost all of my Reiki sessions when I first started out. And after about a year of that, I realized that I couldn't continue to do that. Because in my mind, I was like, you're not getting full Reiki and you're not getting full mediumship. So you're coming for Reiki, but you're getting 50-50. But like both are incomplete. And what do I do? And do I offer mediumship readings or do I not? And then after about 6 months of going back and forth and spirit going mute on me because I wouldn't make a decision, I finally made the distinction that my Reiki sessions were Reiki sessions and spirit was no longer able to come through. And I wanted to do this for 2 main reasons. Number 1, the amount that I was working, I was working 6 or 7 days a week. I still work with clients 6 days a week. Mediumship takes a lot more effort for me than Reiki, so I was more tired and exhausted, and just the energy output was not feeling very good for me. And the second most important thing was that if spirit didn't come through in your Reiki session, I was having clients that were disappointed. And I would have them at the end of the session say like, "Did anyone come through?" And I was like, "Oh, like no, because sometimes I was really focused or sometimes spirit didn't show up or I didn't ever ask them to show up." So I was like, I'm doing my clients a disservice because everyone's booking Reiki with me, hoping for mediumship, but I don't want to offer mediumship anymore. So now I have to be very clear in my messaging and my marketing to all my clients that Reiki is Reiki. If you want mediumship, please go book a mediumship reading with a medium, but not me. And that took me about a year to kind of shift everything to being like, if you want mediumship, go somewhere else. Reiki is Reiki. I am having strong boundaries with spirit that they are not allowed to come into my sessions. So the way I describe this is I imagine that, for example, I'm sitting here in my office and I imagine that spirit knocks on the door. So I have the option to, look through the window and be like, oh, it's a man. Okay. Or I have the option to crack open the door and say, "Who are you? What do you want?" close the door. Okay, it's their dad. Okay, well. Or I have the option to open the door, let spirit in, and have a full-blown conversation with them. So 5 years ago, Steph, I used to always peek at the door and be like, oh, who's knocking? Oh, it's their dad. Oh, okay, you can come in. And I would end up having conversations with all of these spirits. And the way that I describe it now is that my boundaries are the door is still there in my mind's eye, but I don't even go look. They can knock, they can knock, knock, knock. They can knock, knock, knock the whole session. I don't even go to the door. I don't look in the peephole. I don't open the door. I don't even look. And I had to draw this hard line in the sand because spirit was coming in every single session, and it's beautiful and it's healing and it's helpful, but it's not what I offer. And it's not what people came for. And I am very strong in my belief of if you ordered a burger, I will give you a burger. I'm not going to give you a salad. I'm not going to give you something else because you might like it. If you ordered a burger, I'm giving you a burger. If you booked me for a Reiki session, I am giving you a full and complete Reiki session. So the story today is not about how I broke that boundary. I'm sure you're all like, now she's going to tell us a story about how spirit came right in. But the story today was just a really nice story about how spirit still made themselves known, even though I wouldn't open the door. So before we get into the story, I just have a couple of quick announcements. The June Mediumship Practice Circle is this Saturday on June 28th. If you are interested in joining the Mediumship Practice Circles, I am doing them every month. So you can hop on the June Circle. No experience is needed. It can be your first time. There's no expectations. Worst case scenario, you have a nice little chat with someone, but there's no expectations. We're just trying our best. This is soccer practice. We don't have to get it right on the very first time. My next Reiki Level 1 is happening on July 12th and 13th. If you're waiting for a Reiki training and you want to get out of the summer heat, come join that. And my next Reiki Level 2 is July 26th and 27th. So today's story starts with a virtual session that I was doing. It was a Reiki and card pull session, and this virtual session includes 60 minutes of Reiki, and then 15 minutes after the Reiki is where I will pull cards for you and do a card reading. So in the first few minutes of this session, we just have a quick chat about, hi, how are you? What would you like me to focus on today? Have you ever had Reiki before? The basics, housekeeping notes. And my client, she expressed that she was having a really hard time with grief at the moment. She was feeling really heavy because her father had recently passed. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry for that. Like, we can definitely work on grief and emotions and, help you to feel more like yourself again. So after we chat for a few minutes at the start of a virtual session, you then lie down and get comfortable. So she lies down and gets comfortable. I turn on my music and do what I have to do. And while I'm connecting to her energy, I just think like, oh, I wonder if her dad will show up today. I wonder if, her dad will knock on the door, like this poor thing. And, I'm still a softie. As much as I have these hard boundaries, spirit, it's always beautiful. It's always healing. It's always important. And I know that. And I know that people want to hear from their loved ones, and that I'm able to do that is really a gift. So the first few minutes of the session, I was like, I wonder if her dad's going to show up. And then I was like, no, Steph, you have boundaries. And I was like, okay, but what if he's just like knocking on the door? And then I was like, no, Steph, you have boundaries. So then I was like, right, get to work. So I did the 60 minutes of Reiki. And in the last few minutes of the session, as we're wrapping up the Reiki portion, I just quickly think to myself, I'm surprised her dad didn't show up. I'm surprised he didn't try something. And I was like, okay, maybe my boundaries are really, really strong, but, I was just kind of expecting him to show up. So for the next portion, the client sits up, I give them a few minutes, and then we start to pull cards. So she was sitting up, I'm getting out my card decks, and right outside my window were these two birds who were squawking like crazy. It started as soon as I grabbed my card decks, and they were squawking. they were so loud. I said to her, "Can you hear those birds squawking over Zoom?" And she was laughing. She's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "They are so loud." And she was like, "Yeah, they are." I'm like, "I'm so sorry." So I waited kind of a second thinking that the birds would stop squawking, and they didn't. So I said, "I'm going to keep going even though these birds are yelling at us." So the first portion of it is you select your deck. And I was like, "What deck would you like? These are your options." The birds are squawking to the point where like we could barely hear each other. I cannot express how loud these birds were squawking. And then the one bird flew away. And I was like, "Okay, now there's only one bird." And then I'm trying to do the reading, and the bird is just going and going and going. And I stood up at one moment. I was like, I have to see what bird this is because this has never happened in any of my sessions. I sit here 6 days a week all the time, and I never have squawking birds in my background. So I looked up, and it was a blue and white bird. And then as soon as I saw the colors, I was like, oh, it's her dad trying to get our attention. So when I sat back down, I said to her, "Are blue and white birds a sign for you and your dad, or are birds a sign for you and your dad? Because I think this is your dad trying to get our attention because he knew that I wouldn't allow him to come through in the 60 minutes of Reiki." And she said, "Yes, like birds are like something that I asked my dad for." She was very happy that it was a sign from her dad. And for the whole card reading, this bird is squawking in the back. It would not stop. We kept laughing. I kept pausing, thinking that it would stop. It was so distracting. It was so loud, but like her dad was sending a message. So I took a picture of the bird. I told her I would send it to her. I apologized for the noise, but I said, "I think this is your dad really trying to make sure he gets in his hello and, making himself known in spirit." So I closed the Zoom, and I kid you not, the second that I clicked end meeting, the bird flew away. And it was silent for the rest of the day, and that bird has never come back and made the noise since. It was so crazy how instant it was. So when I sent her a picture of her cards and a picture of the bird, I said, "That was definitely your dad," because the second I hit end meeting, the bird flew away and stopped squawking. So I just wanted to share this really beautiful story of a dad coming to visit and making sure his daughter got a message, making sure she knew that he was here and around and sending a hello. So even though my boundaries with spirit are very strong as I won't talk to them, they usually find a way of doing something to make sure that they're known. But this was just so loud. It was a really beautiful story, and we were laughing about how loud this bird was. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my podcast. I release new episodes every Wednesday. I also post a lot of helpful and fun information over on Instagram at Medium in the Middle. I am also on TikTok, Facebook, everywhere, Medium in the Middle. I am TBD on if I will have an episode next week. It is Canada Day and 4th of July. So if I find the time, I will release an episode. If not, we will be back on July 9th. But until next Wednesday, Middlers, when I see you in your ears, I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.